All right, Temple 420 family, welcome back. We have a special guest today. There's Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. And today we have Yitzhak, laughter, Isaac, who is Abraham's son, who almost got sacrificed. Thank God he's still with us today. This is a hemp farmer, and I haven't had a guest on yet. Isaac, what's your last name?
My last name is Wigman.
Wigman.
Yeah, German.
Wigman.
Yes.
What does it mean?
Wagon master is what,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
My German family's name is Neubauer. Do you know what that one means?
I don't.
New farmer.
New farmer. There
New
you go.
farmer,
Excellent.
yeah. They were cherry farmers in Europe, and they came to Wisconsin.
Wonderful.
And they became Neubauers, new farmers.
Yeah.
Or maybe they became Neubauers. They were Germans who went to Russia to farm.
Yes.
Yeah. How did your family come to America?
So the German side of the family didn't come until 1810, 1820s.
Oh, that's early.
That's early for that side of the family.
Right.
The other side of my family is Scotch-Irish. They were in the Ohio Valley back in the 1770s. So they were
it's really
the
early.
first dozen families to be settling in this part
area
of the world.
And they must have had to have been farmers back then. Even if you were just a businessman, you farmed.
You would have had moccasins and an axe and a mule if you were here then. And they had came over from Ireland because they were displaced from Scotland to the Ulster Scott plantation in Ireland, what makes them Scot-Irish.
Right.
And then from there, they took indentured servitude ticket to get their boat ride to the States. 7 years of indentured labor, and then you're a free man on a new continent. And as soon as they were able, they got their mules and axes and went west of the Appalachians, far from the civilization.
The plantations or whatever that they worked on. Yeah, what's interesting, a lot of people don't realize that most of the slaves in America were white people until it became more profitable to bring African slaves. So, and we're not here to talk about slavery, we're here to talk about God and about hemp. And now Isaac is a hemp farmer here in West Virginia. But you've grown up, did you grow up in a specific church, or did you just grow up?
So I was exposed mostly to the United Methodist Church growing up. Family on both sides was in the church. My grandmother was a regular church lady and an elder in the community, and the church in town where I actually grew up was on land donated by my ancestors, and they built the church in the early 1800s. So it's a family church,
That's so cool. And Isaac's family has been in this area, the Ohio Valley, for over 200, almost 300 years?
Yeah. So
when in the 1700s?
1770s is when they would have first showed up here.
So 250 years.
Yeah, about 250 years or so. We've been Ohio Valley proud.
Wow. And this was the first church in Ohio, in Wheeling. Did you know that?
Here. Yeah. That's what you were saying
1848.
Yeah. And I'm sure
some of your ancestors. Yeah, that's so cool. And what's amazing is that time goes by so quickly. I have a great uncle who's passed away now. He died at 100. And we had the same birthday, November 22nd. And he was born in 1906. And even though he was born 30, 40 years after the Lincoln assassination, he still knew people who could remember where they were when Lincoln was assassinated. So even though you're born after the Kennedy assassination,
sure.
Right?
We've got an ancestor story in the family about how when Abe Lincoln was riding around on the trains doing his stump speeches in town, that he gave one of my ancestors a little doll. When she was a tiny little girl. Abe Lincoln gave her a doll at one of these speeches. So that's part of
your family lore. How cool is that? So that's what happens when you've been in an area for a long time and really settle roots in here. So you grew up in the Methodist Church, and what's your favorite book of the Bible?
I myself, I'm a naturalist. I appreciate nature and just the very basic, I love Genesis. In the fact that just it is, the foundation and the root of the story of where all this originates. And I think there's so much power in that just preliminary understanding of, God created this world.
Yeah, in the beginning, Bereshit. What's interesting, and that's like the idea of still creating when you say it in the Hebrew, because it's an active language, like a concrete language.
Yeah, and we're always in the now, and it's always being created, and it's
right. Well, and we're made in God's image right from the very beginning, and He created everything with the Word, and even I think John says in the book of John, oh, and the Word was made flesh, and Jesus came to life as the Word made flesh in front of us, or in front of people at the time. But we say us, like as Jewish people, we still, when we celebrate Passover, we say, when I was a slave in Egypt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the Passover?
A little bit.
Okay.
A little bit, yeah.
It was interesting. I met a woman in today who was a Christian, and we started talking. And she says, well, that's so interesting that you're Jewish and a Christian. And I said, yeah. I said, I've always tried to emphasize the Jewish part of the New Testament. And she goes, well, can you give me an example? And I said, well, in, I think, the first chapter of John, or the second chapter where they go to the wedding, I said, everyone thinks, oh, it's a miracle. He turned water into wine. I said, but really, the whole point of that chapter is John and he are making fun of the religious Jewish people who put all the burdens on the Jewish people. They had it on the third day. Did you know the wedding was on a Tuesday?
I believe I've heard that.
Do you know why it was on Tuesday?
I don't.
Because in the book of Genesis, on the third day of creation, God says it was good twice. So it's the day of double blessing. So they get married on a Tuesday. And you know what the turning the water into wine, what kind of water the jars were in?
No.
Okay.
No.
So this is where he's making fun of the Jewish rabbis. So, and not only does he repeat like Moses and turn water into wine, or what Moses turned water into blood, and then he said, this is my blood. So, but the point is it's called takanot, extra things that the rabbis put on people, like burdens, like, oh, if you really want to be religious, this is the ceremonial hand washing cleansing. So it says the Jewish ceremonial hand cleansing. And it's like, you can look anywhere in the Bible, there's nowhere that you use 20 gallons of jar for ceremonial hand cleansing washing. So we said, yeah, fill those dirty ass jars of water that people have been washing their hands in, fill them to the top. And he goes, now go bring a cup to them. And he wasn't like showing off for the whole wedding. It was only for his homies, his talibim, his disciples, his mom, and the servants.
Yeah.
He didn't care about all the other people at the wedding. He wasn't showing off. But when he gives it to the head dude, he's supposed to be like the master of ceremonies, the guy who really knows if the wine's good or not. And he's like, oh, you saved the best wine for last.
Yeah.
And this was some dirty-ass water in a Jewish ritual cleansing that's nowhere in the scriptures.
Yeah.
So I think, as a Jewish person who believes in Jesus, that so much of his ministry was making fun of the rabbis, turning our faith into a business, into, you have to do this, you have to do this, instead of making it as simple as possible, like, hey, love each other, care for the poor, and stuff like that. That's my opinion, but yeah. So now, weed in the Bible. Genesis is your favorite book. I'm sorry, then I started talking too much.
That's okay.
I have a habit of doing that.
It's all right.
It's my show.
That's right.
Anyway, so I like Genesis and Revelation because you have the beginning and the end. And one of my favorite passages is Genesis 1:29, because that's where God gives us the seed-bearing herb. But my other favorite part is the story of Joseph and how he saves his brothers, even though they meant it for evil, that God had another plan. So what's your, now in Genesis, your favorite book, what's your favorite part of that story?
Well, like you were saying, 129, being a farmer,
right,
especially being a hemp farmer,
right.
those words land on your ears in certain ways.
right, exactly.
But as a human, as an animal on this planet,
right,
to realize that, it is these plants that are the food for us, and it is coming from, these divine sources. It's we can't make a seed. We can breed a seed, we can grow a plant, but we don't grow the plant. We facilitate giving the plant a place where it can grow. And just like ourselves, that only happens through this magical spirit of life,
Right. Almost like it's undescribable, the magic of life. Like the fact that two people can make another human, or that a seed makes a plant. And I think it's Mark 4:20 that says when a seed can land in good soil, it can produce a harvest that's 30, 60, or 100-fold.
Yeah.
and Jesus said, I am the farmer, my word is the seed. I think that's what he was talking about there.
Yeah. And so, so many places you can go with that. But, if you, to be in service of this life force that happens here, and, as a farmer, it's my job to help that soil to be a healthy place for the plants to be able to do their thing, So it's that stewardship in the world,
right,
taking care, that I think is like a great message from the plant world for us.
And do you mind sharing your age with people?
I just turned 36 this last weekend. So
happy birthday.
Thank you.
Which day was your birthday?
October 29th.
Oh, my cousin's birthday as well.
Excellent.
Very cool. And how many children do you have?
I have 2 children. I have a 6-year-old son, Abiram, and a...
is that a biblical name?
It is. It is.
Where is it from in the Bible?
I'd have to look it up to see what the story is, but Abiram's... There was a few Abirams in the Bible, and it's kind of a heavy name, There's not necessarily great stories that go along with it.
I like Uriah. I think Uriah is a really cool name. Do you know who Uriah is?
I don't.
Uriah was the Hittite who was in David's army, and he was so loyal to David. And David slept with his wife, Bathsheba. And then David felt guilty because she was pregnant. So he's like, I don't want to get busted. So he brings him back from the front lines. And the guy's like, well, it wouldn't be right for me to sleep with my super hot wife while all my fellow soldiers are out there suffering. So he sleeps outside the door of his house. And Dave's like, oh, shit. and it's such a great story of redemption, too, because he has him killed. He has him murdered. Like, David's a fucking murderer, and he's like a guy after God's own heart. And it's interesting because it's not until the prophet Nathaniel, I mean, now you know the story, right? So I'm just kind of sharing it for them. So it's when the prophet Nathaniel comes to him, and like his son's dying, and he's like, why is all this bad things happening? He goes, oh, your honor, or king, whatever. He's like, we've got a bad man in the land. You're kidding. Who is that guy? And he's like, yeah. He goes, what happened? What'd he do? He's like, well, he's a rich man. He's got lots of sheep. But he killed someone and took his sheep. Oh, no way. Who is it? And he like points the finger at himself. And Dave's like ready to kill him. And then he has to kill himself. So in a way, it's almost like he has a spiritual rebirth. He has to go through sackcloth and ash and fasting and really repent and feels that guilt. And then God forgives him. And, he's writing all the Psalms. And so he is really connected to our Creator in such a deep way. It's interesting. And my favorite one as a Jewish person is Psalm 22, which, you know which one that is?
You're going to have to tell me.
So the way the Psalms really work, and you go to like temple in town here, a lot of times the rabbi sings the first line of the psalm or of the song, and then the whole congregation joins in the rest. And so Jesus, as a rabbi, the first line of that is Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. He's like, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then they'd read the whole thing, and it's all about him being pierced, him being crucified, his clothes being gambled for, because they're too valuable to be ripped apart. And it's like all the stuff that actually happened to him, King David wrote 1,500 years before. And you're like, that's what's so amazing about the Bible to me, is the prophecy part. How they tell you what's going to happen ahead of time, so that when it happens, you're like, dang, our God is the real true God. He knows what's up. And he even says that from the prophets. He's like, I'm telling you what's going to happen ahead of time, because your gods of idols of stone and metal and whatever can't do that.
Yeah.
And I can. That's what sets me apart. That's how you know I'm the one true God. I can tell the beginning from the end. And so I've been trying to emphasize, I don't know, you saw 1 episode, 2 episodes of my thing?
2 episodes.
2 episodes.
Yeah.
So I don't know which one you saw, but I've been trying to emphasize the end time prophecy, because I really thought that Corona is the white horse, like Dr. Fauci came as a good guy, like a healer, like Jesus with his white horse, but he was really poisoning people. And he used the bow, which in Greek is toxon, which is just like a common face cloth, and then the crown in Latin is corona. So I don't know, God's speaking to us in code or whatever, but it seemed to make sense to me. That I'm like, oh, because it's the whole world. It says he came to conquer and this whole thing, and this was really a global thing. And really, to me, it was just some like military psyop, because I'm like, how are people falling for this? And even my own parents were like, not my dad didn't fall for it, but he wore the mask. But my mom was like, oh, you got to stay in the guest house. And she's like putting food outside the door, like was afraid of me. And I'm like, oh my God, they got to you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, fear sells,
And my mom's smart.
Yeah.
So it was amazing. And even Ben Shapiro. So you know who Ben Shapiro is?
Yeah.
He's like, oh, they tricked me. They lied. I'm like, dude, you let yourself be tricked, because his wife's a doctor. And not that he was making money pushing it, but I think he really felt, because his wife was a doctor and she was getting pushed. And they're both smart people.
Yeah.
So you can't fool us. We're intelligent. But then I saw Mark Zuckerberg in his private meeting saying, well, we don't know what this will do, changing people's DNA. And then when he's testifying in front of Congress, he's like, oh, I had no idea it'll change people's DNA, and that's why there's been this, I've been also focusing on this Kanye West controversy, how Kanye's calling out certain Jewish people and saying, hey, I'm not anti-Semitic. Jewish people have a lot to offer the world. They really have community. We should copy them and emulate that community part. He goes, but some of them are just in love with money and don't value other people. And so he was calling out, and they're like, he's anti-Semitic. We'll cancel his bank account and all this. And me and a couple other Jewish people were going, well, not that we're anti-Semitic. We love our own people. But there are some bad Jewish people, and we should be able to criticize them without being called anti-Semitic. How do you feel about that? Does it have anything to do with the Bible, or do you just want to shut up about it because you think it could get you canceled?
Well, just looking at the world, there's bad apples in every bunch. And, it's very easy to jump on a bandwagon of calling yourself one thing or the other, and then you have that underlying reputation, that connection to whatever specific group or ideology. But if you look into the fabric of any ideology or any people's, you're going to find a bad apple or two.
Right.
Bad actors.
Doesn't matter what the group is.
Yeah. So.
It's interesting. I think one of the things that makes Jewish people more sensitive to this anti-Semitism, and this is what Kanye was saying, is that Jewish people have a very public role in the media in the United States, which happens to be a global media.
Sure.
And I point out the fact that there's historical reasons for that. Just like there's a historical reason you're in this valley farming. That's what your ancestors have done.
Yeah.
And Jewish people for many years were not allowed to own land, and Christian people weren't allowed to loan other Christians money at an interest rate.
Yeah.
So there's a void where people and Jewish people provided clothing and entertainment and banking services.
Yeah.
And so you tend to find our people in those fields now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And, our ancestors lay the foundation for us in so many ways,
Right.
And thinking about, just living our lives and the impact of what we do now on the future, is just as valid now as it was thousands of years ago. We're always laying a foundation for the next generations to come, and we're all a product of that common dream of man.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, we're going to fall into certain stereotypes, regardless of where you come from, because they do apply to reality and historical context of where we're all coming from and where we're all going.
You have a 6-year-old?
I do.
And a how old?
2-year-old.
And a 2-year-old.
Yes.
And have you started teaching them anything about the Bible yet?
We've just introductory. We've done a couple Sunday schools down at the church. We have a church on our farm, actually, that's my wife's family's ancestors' church. And at one point, my 6-year-old, who was a little bit younger then, he was asking about the Bible and about Jesus. And, what's this building on the farm where these people meet up? Okay. And, we said, well, that's a church. It's, a house of God. It's they talk about Jesus,
And you guys attend sometimes?
We do.
Okay, cool.
And he expressed his own curiosity in finding more about that, so we took him then and started introducing
and
him.
It's Ron? Or how do you say his name?
It's a Byram.
A Byram.
It's Abhiram.
Okay, so A-B is Ab, that means father, like Avi or Abraham. So Byram, Ab-Byram. So I would be a Yud, the hand of God, and then Rosh is the head hand of God, and then Rum with an M or an N? M. So that's the Mem, which is a picture of babbling water over rocks, and it means noise or talking.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So his name is an Aleph, Bet, or father, the strong man of the house, and then Yud, Rosh, Mem, which would be the hand of God, the head hand of God that speaks, kind of. So that's definitely a biblical name.
Yeah.
And,
I can't place the book or verse, but Abiram was a leader. He had some bad things going on, and his whole encampment of people were swallowed by the earth in the desert.
Oh, so that's in
one of the Abiram.
So that's when he gets the when Moses comes down from the Mount Sinai with the 10 Commandments, and the people have built the golden calf.
Yes.
And the earth swallows them up alive. Yeah, yes. Like 32 families or something. Yeah. Okay, he's one of the leaders of the bad guys. Oh, no, all right. At least he got a nice, strong name.
But it was an ancestor's name. Right. Wow, we didn't go pick it out. It was already in the family,
That's cool.
So maybe just a reminder to, maybe the ancestors gave him that name so he didn't get too far ahead of himself,
Who knows?
Yeah.
Do you know what the Shema is?
I do not.
In the book of Exodus, I don't remember which chapter it is, but I think it's like 38. It's toward the end of Exodus. Shema Yisrael Adonai Elokeinu Adonai Echad. And it's, Hear, O Israel, our God is one, and our God is basically the one true God. And we should, and then it goes on, tell our kids about him in the morning, when we eat breakfast, when we wake, and when we walk into the field, and when we come in for lunch, and when we, and it's just a reminder. That's what, the mezuzah. Have you ever seen a mezuzah? When people like, oh, kiss the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments scrolled up, rolled in there, and there's that little S symbol, well, it looks like a W, but it's a shin, and it stands for Shema, because it's to remind us to always be focused on the commandments. And so what happened was, when they came out of Egypt, they were still focused on Egypt. And they're like, Moses brought us out here in the desert to die. This manna sucks. We could have died in Egypt as slaves. At least we'd have some food. They're all grumbling.
Yeah.
And they're like, we need to start worshiping some idols and building a golden calf and blah, blah, blah. So when they build the idol and Moses comes down, he's like, oi, I just got you out of Egypt. What are you guys doing? And so God opens up the ground and swallows the bag, and just like, he's kind of a punishing God, if you mess up, there's no tomorrow. But at the same time, he's also forgiving and loving, so it's interesting. I wonder, that's what I think a lot of Christians feel like the Old Testament God, even though God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, they're like, well, the Old Testament God is so vengeful and violent, like, kill all those people, they're taking the land, but, maybe they deserve the death penalty, I don't know, but he's like, kill their animals, kill this, don't take any, some of them, not all of them, but, and it is so much harsher than, I forgive you. He who has no sins cast the first stone, that's like, that doesn't seem like the same God. But I think it is. Now, are you familiar with the book of Revelation?
Generally, not in depth, but yes, and broad concepts.
Okay, now you don't have to agree exactly with me, but do you think we might be living in the end times type of situation?
I do personally feel like there's a lot to be said about that right now, and that it may not be the end of all things, but it may be the end of a way of being, or a way that everything's manifesting here in this reality. And I do believe that we are seeing the end of many things that have been building for a very long time. And so on the upside, that means there must be a new beginning.
For sure. Yeah, I'm not like fearful. I think that one of the main things the New Testament and even the book of Revelation tells us is don't be fearful. Like, have no fear. And that's what I think as Christians, we can be confident that even like the guys who got thrown into the fire, they said, oh, we're not worried. We're not going to follow your God. God will save us. And even if he doesn't, we're still not worried. We're still not bowing down to your shit.
We're still riding that train.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I tell, life and death, it's heavy. But, I smile every day because I know, by the grace of God, I showed up in this body. By the grace of God, I'm going to be leaving it. And so is every other living thing on this planet. There's no getting around it. The bus is coming for us.
Right.
We're on the ride. So, hang on to your hat and put a smile on and, don't worry about it.
Yeah, Anna showed me a video of some rocks that grow and breathe. And it was kind of cool. And I thought, oh, wow, what happens if all rocks breathe? It says they only breathe like once every 2 weeks. Like that's how slow their breath is.
Yeah.
And remember when Jesus entered Jerusalem? Now, are you familiar with that story?
Lay it on me.
Okay. Well, the Jewish part is every year they would inspect the lamb, and after the lamb had been inspected for 3 days, they would say, "Here comes the Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world." And they would enter him through the gate of the city and march him to the temple so that the priest could sacrifice him, so that he would be the sacrificial lamb for that year's Passover. Then comes the 10 days of atonement, and then Yom Kippur, or the 10 days of awe, then Yom Kippur, and then the Feast of Tabernacles, where God comes to dwell with us, or we dwell with God, and it's the reminder of the 40 years in the desert. So the first part of it is the lamb. So when Jesus entered the city, his disciples beat the priest to the gate, and Jesus enters the gate of the city, and his disciples yell, "Here comes the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world." And so all the people rush with their palm leaves and goes, "Hosanna, Hosanna." And he's been preaching at the temple. He's been performing all these miracles. And so everyone's celebrating him as the Messiah right then. So he marches into town fulfilling the prophecy. And the priests are like, "Tell your disciples to shut up." And he's like, "Listen," he says, "even if I told them to shut up, the rocks themselves would speak."
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Are the rocks really going to speak? Are they going to come to life? And maybe they really are alive already. But because they're so slow and breathing so slow that we just don't see it, because everything is kind of alive on the earth.
Absolutely.
And has a spiritual essence at some level.
Cross-cultural here, but
Native
American.
That's what I was going to say. That's why we burned the hemp at the beginning, because even though I was raised Jewish, it felt dead to me in so many ways, and I didn't really learn how to pray until I was in the sweat lodge with the Indians, and we had all the elements of the earth, and the Indians are tribal people.
And the stones in the sweat lodge are alive, and speak,
exactly.
And when you witness that, you're like,
it all of a sudden makes biblical sense, right? No, and I get exactly. It's so funny that we connect in that way too. Yeah, I have some good friends at the bottom of the Grand Canyon on the Havasupai Reservation, and my mom started taking me there as a kid, and right when I turned 18, my parents were divorced and nuts. I couldn't get that free vacation out of my family anymore, so I started volunteering and helping the Indians, and got to know them, and they invited me into the sweat lodge, and I've become friends with them ever since. It's been like 40 years now, and so now we're friends. I've known like 7 generations or 6 generations of some of the elders, and now it's the babies. I've even introduced one of my friends married into the tribe and stuff, and so I'm like, I helped make those babies. It's a cool feeling. I'm so glad. I never want to go too far, and this is the most off-topic one I've ever had. But I feel really blessed to have you on my show. So you're a farmer. You're a hemp farmer. I want you to just close with the spiritual side of growing cannabis. And like I said, we burn it as a sacrament because I know it brings stoners together, and it's kind of in that native way. Our prayers are carried by the smoke is what the natives believe, and it makes sense to me, just how Jesus said, "This wine turns into my blood." I mean, obviously you're not drinking like a vampire, but spiritually and symbolically, the bread of life. He goes, "This is my body, and I'm life, and they're going to break me. And so when you break this bread on the Passover, or whenever you break bread, think of me." And so that's what's so cool about it for me. And like I said, as a Jewish person, I read that New Testament. I'm like, these are all Jews. I totally relate to everything they're saying. But tell me how marijuana, cannabis, hemp is spiritual and godly, and end it with that for our people.
From my perspective in travels with cannabis, I've seen so much good come from the plant to benefit people. It's a giving tree. It has so much to offer us, yet at the same time, for all of its gifts, it's been persecuted by man almost more so than any other plant, and held down. And, I think that has a lot to say about the power and the gift that the plant actually is for the people on this earth. And it's just it's healing in so many ways. It's a source of food. It can be a source of energy. It's a great gift for us to have on this planet. And I've always heard that when your intention is good works, you're going to find some opposition. And I think it's very clear with cannabis that may be the case.
Right. And it's so funny because when they hear about a marijuana church, or they hear about anything cannabis related, because it's so been demonized in the public, they think, oh, you can't be sincere. You guys just want to get high. You're not trying to help people. You're not trying to spread the word. You're an insincere Christian. And I just feel like I don't want to judge those people or be upset with them, but I feel like seeing what a gentle human being you are, how sincere you are about the plant, and just hearing in your voice the passion that you have for God, for your farm, for your family, that's what I want our people to see. And I think in the future, when the future people look back at our videos, they're going to be like, oh, we seem totally normal. We are the future. Like, even though I've been doing this since the 70s, and it's been so hard and challenging, because my dad is like, when I was a kid, as far as I'm concerned, marijuana is as bad as heroin. Each hit of the joint is like a needle in your arm. And so I've had to overcome that opposition from the police, from my family, from my school, to say that, hey, this is a godly plant. And now, seeing a farmer, a young man like you, farming and having a family, and this is a career. I mean, this is the stuff I dreamed about when I was 12 years old, that I started working to legalize this plant.
Yeah, and without everybody who's believed in this plant and taken a risk, I know that I would never be where I am today with it. I'm so thankful to be able to be a farmer and not be afraid of being persecuted for this plant that we cultivate and believe in the goodness of. And I just
I've been arrested twice, had my life savings seized twice for running Temple 420 and really helping people. We sincerely were helping a lot of people, and like you said, there's just opposition to the truth. And when they're not making money off of it, whether it's the pharmaceutical companies or the prisons or whoever was making money off of its prohibition, when you realize they're calling good evil and evil good, that's one of the things that makes me think we're in the end times, because it talks about that will happen. The fact that Israel is back, as prophesied by Ezekiel and the other prophets, that we would be destroyed and come back. And I believe we're God's people because Jesus came through our people, the Messiah. And unfortunately, if you look at the whole history of the Jewish people, they never get it right the first time. They always kind of miss the boat. Even, it doesn't matter who it was, but then we come around and figure it out. So I have a lot of faith for our people, and I just think we're going to seem so normal, whether it's 10, 20, 100 years from now. If this video ever survives, they're going to be like, oh yeah, those dudes look normal. All the other crazy people are running around the cities, living off of fake money that they printed out of thin air. We're growing our food, being with our families, having a church on our land, I think that's the future. I may be wrong, but I really think that's what's coming. Even though we seem like freaks and oddities now, in the future, I think we are going to be the normal ones. Because we're having children. We're like the Amish. They're the fastest growing minority in America, and we're having children. The LGBT community can't even reproduce. They're trying to recruit our children because they can't make their own. So
they'll get some of those Amish on their side. It'll be all right.
Well,
it'll balance out.
Here's the thing. Well, I think if we're able to live on our land, be with our children, teach them the word, and ground them in hemp and the faith and hemp and the faith, like, here's a way that you can make your own food. You're not dependent on diesel fuel, trains. You're not living as wealthily.
Here's a means that fits into the parameters of this natural system.
Right. This is the longest video I've done so far this year. It probably will be the longest one I'll ever do. But we're gonna go. We're at 40 minutes right now, so in one more minute we'll be at 42. We'll end it at 42. So you can see the time. I'm gonna let you close it up, guys. Thanks for watching. Craig X, Temple 420. Like and subscribe. Go. You got 1 minute.
Be better. Do what you can to be better every day. However that is, wherever you are, strive to be better for everyone and this planet. And that's about the best I've got.
That's awesome. You want to end it there?
I think so.
Okay, well, I can talk forever. So I'm going to stretch it out for 40 more seconds or whatever to try and end it right at like 4:20 and 0 seconds. I do that. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you got a lot of value out of Isaac Wigman, the farmer from Ohio Valley, West Virginia, Wheeling, West Virginia, where you can still come and buy an inexpensive farm, buy an inexpensive house, and be close to farmers here in West Virginia. It's not like Deliverance, which is what I thought, because I'm from LA and watch too many movies. God bless you guys. Thanks for watching. Bye.